you can prevent certain things from happening and ensure that you get, Six Sigma type performance out of a really dangerous system.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned Six Sigma type performance because, you stimulated this question as I'm listening to it because in commercial aviation, the safety record is incredible, right? I mean, it's like 99.99% successful takeoffs and landings. I guess it's a little bit less with the Navy because it's a lot more dangerous. But still, you have an amazing amount of successful operations going on where you're launching and landing aircraft day in and day out. Talk a little bit about what that operation is like. I mean, how does that get designed? How do you know when you're at capacity or what capacity is? And I'm sure it depends on things like the weather, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that is done is, there's a lot of planning that goes into it. There's a lot of training that goes into it. So, for the training side, everybody's trained on some basic safety principles. You're not allowed on the flight deck unless you know what to do. You're also, required to wear certain equipment to basically keep yourself as safe as can be, right? I say safely because, you can work safely, but it's not a safe environment. Um, so, so for example, everybody wears hearing protection, everybody wears goggles, you use hand signals because you can't hear. So, pulling chocks, turning up your speed or whatever, all of those things are are what are done in order to communicate in a really challenging environment. Even passing control of the aircraft, they'll use hand signals to pass that control, and there's positive confirmation of that control as well. Um, so working safely, there's always a brief ahead of time. You always say, here's, for this particular go, which is a launch of maybe, 10, 12 airplanes. Here's what we're going to do. Everybody meets together. They talk about the plan, kind of like, calling a timeout before an NCAA game, right? Or whatever. Here's our pregame plan. You go and execute the plan. You say, how'd we do? If there are any problems, there's a process to kind of iron out those problems. There's a safety reporting, process. So it's fast feedback loops, um, planning in advance, understanding how to communicate with people, and and then also just executing that in real time. Being flexible, everybody's highly trained, but they're empowered to make decisions and empowered to, stop. I'm going to say pull the line, the and on cord kind of. If you see something that's unsafe, we can do what's called a suspend. So instead of launching the aircraft, something's wrong, you stop the process. So we kind of step it up to readiness, and you get to a point where you say, okay, that is, we are ready, we're good to go, we got a green light, deck's clear, no other issues, I'm going to launch, and you launch.
And so, how often does this suspend happen? I mean, is that an occasional thing or rare thing, or
I'd say it's fairly occasional, but the reality is the steps that have to happen is first, there's a lot of verification processes that go on as just normal operations. So first they'll come up and they'll show a weight board to the pilot. And again, all of this has been briefed ahead of time. They've said, hey, we need, for example, 45,000 pounds for an F-18. That's our weight. And they'll hold up a board and they're allowed to change it, twice. And if it's wrong, then the pilot has to actually call up to the tower and get them to change that setting. Because what that does is it changes a valve that opens to basically be able to push the steam, into what's called basically in the catapult, shoots the spears down, and then drags the aircraft off, and launches it into the air. Um, but all of the process to get that set up and verified, happens in a loop of conversation and communications with the pilot, with the deck crew, with um, the handler, who's the guy who basically plans the movement of all these things ahead of time.